Welcome back again to Tuesday nights, First Take Tuesdays of Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings, version 2, Electric Boogaloo. We are back, and we're back with you now. James and Gary, myself, Kraig, going over injury trades with the trade deadline, waiver news for all of you. James, you ready to get back into this?
Oh, I definitely am. I'm 10 minutes behind, and I'm dying to get these thoughts out.
Gary, you ready?
Yes.
All right. Just as a reminder for you guys, bye weeks this week, we have Detroit, Seattle, Tampa Bay, and Washington. So keep that in mind with any sort of waiver advice or questions you may have for us. Please add those into the YouTube comments and we will get to them. But James, looks like you're talking to us about injuries this week. So what you got on that front?
Yeah, I bet your team has some injuries. I'm right, aren't I? Because every single team and every single league has injuries. Take a look around your league, and I'm actually serious. Go and look at the other 11 rosters in your league or 14 teams or, whatever it is. Actually click on the rosters and see how teams are doing with injuries. You'll see everybody has them right now. Maybe there's one lucky soul who lucked out, but odds are every single team is dealing with it. And, this happens every season. Nothing I'm saying here is surprising. We all know injuries are unpredictable, but you'll notice something about elite managers. They know how to work their way around them. And they also know how to build a roster without relying on multiple guys with injured, riddled pasts. If you recall way back when, if you've been paying attention to us long enough, I touted Devin Bush pretty highly. I said he was going to be a clear-cut linebacker. One, he had a great week one, and then he got hurt. And now he's very much not a linebacker one. So if you listen to my advice, it didn't work out. Whoops. But something I didn't include with that advice that was very necessary, and this I apologize for, and I'll say whoops again, is if you took Bush, you need to have filled out the rest of your IDP roster with sturdier players. Players who aren't going to break as easily as Bush likely would. And you also remember, way back when, I was talking about how these players, there's no one who's really an injury risk. There's not anyone who's that much more likely to get hurt than someone else. And that still rings true. But there are also players who are on specific teams with specific contract situations, undergoing specific sets of circumstances, where they are a little bit more likely. It's not that that person has brittler bones, but they have more cautious bones to getting out there and playing. So just like you can't take 6 linebackers in a 2 linebacker, 2 LB flex league and have 2 guys sitting on your bench, you can't take 6 injury-riddled, ready-to-go players. You have to balance it out. You can't bulk up on those injured guys. So all I'm saying is make sure you plan accordingly. If you're sitting on a roster right now and you're decimated by injuries, make sure you're decimated because you added a bunch of injured people off of waivers because you could, as opposed to being that guy who just drafted everyone and tried to hit the lottery and you didn't. Elite managers know how to work around injuries. You should too.
I have a follow-up question sort of for that. Do you guys have like a standard amount of IR, and like this is, more so for Dynasty, although I think we're going to see it being needed in redraft too, with the changes to the IR rules. But do you guys have a standard number of IR slots for your leagues? And then do you guys have leagues that let players that aren't on the IR or COVID, which, it kind of seems to count now in a lot of leagues, but other designations like the PUP list and that stuff fall onto those?
Yeah, traditionally it's 3 IR spots in the majority of the leagues that I commissioner. And in all honesty, I feel like that's the perfect amount. I understand that in today's NFL world, you're going to have more than 3 guys on IR a fairly decent amount of time. And that's what your bench is for. If you need to slot those guys, you can. But the best leagues and the best ecosystem for a league is to force managers to have to make tough decisions. I'm a huge proponent of large leagues, large rosters, but you still have to make tough decisions with what you're doing. It's not a draft and you just sit there and you have enough bench spots to just add the world. You have to make transactions, and you can't really increase injured slots, in my opinion, with the higher percentage of people going on IR now. It's more you have to work around it. I don't like the idea of leagues having a get out of jail free card, so to speak, where it's like, oh, he's injured, throw him on IR for forever. You want to have tough decisions, because if you don't, then you're just doing a draft. You're not playing a fantasy league, you're just drafting.
Gary?
Yeah, I like one or two. Depends on the type of the league. The ones that I put together, dynasty league or keeper league or something like that. I give a couple, but it's like there's sleeper leagues that I have. They don't have any IR spots. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be engaging. So I make them play the waiver wire as much as possible if you want to play. Usually a few people in those tipster leagues will drop out in each league, but those ones that like to play and like to stay active. So I don't have any on those, but those are redrafts. My money leagues in MFL, the redrafts, I believe they got 2 spots each. But yeah, 1 or 2. I like to keep that waiver wire active in any size league. It doesn't matter if it's 12 or 16. So I kind of force it a little bit by not having too much IR.
Yeah, most of them that I've seen are 2 or 3, and I kind of like that as well to keep people active and moving things around. So always interesting to see how other people run it. And speaking of injuries, we're going to move right into sort of the news of injuries, and there isn't a whole lot of note this week, which is good for your sort of standard IDP leagues. But there was one big one, Danielle Hunter going on IR with a pec injury for the year for the Vikings. Pretty much the main guy for the Vikings on that defensive line, although Everson Griffin had been coming on as of late. He had been playing a good majority of the snaps on that defensive line. So he's someone of note to pay attention to, but is there anyone else on that defensive line at that other DN position, Gary, that you're thinking to keep an eye on?
No, who was a Woomley or something like that? He's
DJ Wanham, I think, is one of them.
He's had a couple opportunities before in the past to make an impact, and very rarely had he that I can remember. He was just hot enough for a minute for a bunch of people to try to pick him up and hope for the best. So, Griffin, I do like Griffin's matchup this weekend. I mean, who was they playing? Let me think. Either way, I do remember. I do like him as a strong play this weekend. I just
play the Ravens.
Yes, Ravens allow a lot off the edge. Top 5. That's right.
Anyone interest you, Griffin or otherwise there, James?
I mean, I was going to come into this question thinking, is Everson Griffin going to become a guy eventually? And that was before Hunter got hurt. Now the answer is very clearly no, he's not going to go back to being that guy. He, might have been able to do it with, an elite guy on the other side, but DJ Wanham is not that guy. If you're in a league where you need to go and just chase people who are playing football, you can go ahead DJ Wanham. If you're in a league where you don't have that kind of depth, you should not be touching him. He's going to need to perform many times over in order for him to fall into a circle of trust area. And, like Gary said, maybe you could run him on a stream here this week because you're kind of in desperate need, and he's going up against the Ravens, and they do get tons of tackles coming off the edge, but that's a pretty desperate move here. So I'm going to say, no, you don't really need to think about Wanham short-term or long-term unless you're desperate.
I would like to add this, since we're on Minnesota here, that as a group here, James and I, we had a really good weekend when it come to making a call and something. So, I actually had a pretty good weekend altogether. I had a few calls that was made last week that kind of worked out. So Xavier Woods, if you picked him up, if you listened to me I know I said something Thursday. I believe I mentioned him in our waiver wire show. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, he's got another great matchup. So if you picked him up and you need another buy DB, he probably will not do what he did this past week. I mean, He had some crazy numbers against Dallas in a revenge game, but he's still going to have a really nice ceiling. His adrenaline just isn't going to be pumping that good. So keep him in play. He's a good bye week play again this week.
All right. Moving on to a couple trades that one of them definitely will have IDP relevance. The other one probably not as much, but starting off with the big one, Von Miller was traded to the Rams from the Broncos for a 2022 second and third. James, I'm going to let you take this from either angle. The edge pieces for the Broncos or what this does to the linebacking core, adding Von Miller to that group when he's healthy of the Rams. Which side do you see this affecting more in terms of relevancy of the guys already there?
I mean, I feel like the play is for Miller to become an elite edge rusher for the Rams in terms of snap percentage. I feel like that's why you're going to give up a second and a third. That's a pretty high price in the NFL for someone of Miller's age. You're expecting a lot of current production, which I would think would translate to a lot of on-field production. But also, that's just what the price says. What my brain says is I think Miller's value is going to translate about evenly. I don't think that he's going to see any sort of uptick. I don't think he's going to see a downtick either. I think he's just going to kind of keep trudging along as the Von Miller that we know here in 2021, which is a nice and solid, good piece that is going to be prone to some invisible games here and there. And that's fine for an edge rusher. I don't have an issue with that, but he's also not going to go back and be this elite Von Miller defensive player of the year that we've known in the past. So I'm kind of not really thinking much about this trade, if that makes sense. I don't really like any of the guys the Broncos are plugging in either as people who are going to perform this year. They seem to be stepping into a rebuild situation, which is not the greatest situation in general for pass rushers. I know that's a lump sum statement that isn't the most truest all the time, but in general, when you've got young pass rushers coming into a situation where they're probably not going to be pass rushing a whole lot, I tend to go, I don't really want to just add anyone there. So by and large, I don't really see a lot of movement here. Again, whoever steps up in Denver is going to have those snap counts, and therefore they're going to have a higher percentage chance of becoming good. But do I think any of them are? Am I willing to preemptively strike on these guys? No.
So in deeper formats, for one thing, I could have swore that Hollins was across from Floyd to start the season. He was actually doing pretty good. He was actually doing really well when the matchups were right. And he had quite a few of them in a row that they were right. Then he got hurt. Lewis stepped in. Second-year guy, I believe. He actually did fairly decent, too. So I'm kind of wondering what this whole Von Miller thing was about, because you got Floyd on one side, you got Aaron Donald next to Floyd, I believe, a lot of the times. But it's not like I wonder if something went wrong with Hollins. I think Lewis just got hurt, maybe.
Hollins got hurt, I'm pretty sure, because he hasn't played in like 5-6 weeks.
Right. I thought that he might be coming off the IR, but it might not be for another week or two either. I could be incorrect about that. Coming off, I don't expect a jump. I don't think he's going to go up there and become, that guy he used to be. I'm kind of with James. He's just going to keep toting along and doing what he's been doing. Depending if he's moved to the strong side, it's not the weak side where Floyd's probably playing most of the time. So it could actually maybe hamper him a little bit. But he's playing really well this year. I'm looking more at this whole situation, folks. If you hadn't heard, Baron Browning was out of the blue. He just taking over all the snaps in Denver when everybody was expecting a nice game out of Kenny Young, which he still had, considering he'd only been with the team for one week. So, but the kid from out of Ohio State, Browning, he has been hurt all this time. We haven't heard much about him. He just got back to practice, and then he got hurt again, got back to practice again, or something along those lines. I know this because I actually drafted him in a couple of leagues in the rookies because I had extra picks that I could. So either way, he's definitely on everybody's waiver wire this week. I don't see how anybody's not got him on there. And I just want to mention his matchup is actually really good. So I don't put people on my waiver wire unless they actually have a good contest coming up in the following week. It's like, Baron Browning here, if he had broke out, I won't put it this way. Jared Davis is still not on my waiver wire pickup yet. He only played so many snaps last week. And I told everybody after he was coming off IR, the first thing you do is you just hang out. You just sit. You don't actually pick him up. So I actually was forced to in one league. That's how desperate I was, but it turned out all right. Everybody else carried his weight. So, but either way, and we're in a situation, and I still want to see it. They still have Williams on the field with Jared Davis rotating. So I want to see those types of things out of them. Another week or two, another 100% of the snaps and production with it. So we've got to play this smart, folks.
Yeah, and I'll just say I want to get maybe somewhat defensive here because, Browning showed up out of nowhere, played almost 100% of those snaps and looked great. But it was also Kenny Young's first week in that defense, and he got 56% of the snaps, I believe, which is right in line with what he was doing for the Rams the past few weeks. And I'm expecting that to increase. I'm not expecting that to maintain, and I'm expecting Browning to lose some snaps. You bring up.
I have
Jared
a feeling
Davis.
you misunderstood me then. Actually, I just already figured. I guess Kenny Young is already on the radar. I mentioned that I thought I had covered that base when I said, well, it was his first week there. That's why he only played so much. And yes, I do believe in the past in that defense there is room for 2 full-time players. So there's no reason. We're probably looking at something. I'm going to guess neither one of them is going to be better than a linebacker 2.
Gary, I thought we were about to have a nice little battle here. I feel like we haven't done it all season. And now you just have to say some great words and have me agree with you because, I think we've got 2 borderline linebacker 2s sitting right here. I think Browning's the new linebacker 2 who we didn't see coming, and I think Young is the linebacker 2 who we very much are going to see coming. And maybe some of them will have some hot weeks, and maybe they'll work with LB1 status for a week. But by and large, these are back end of your roster linebackers. I'm not buying either one of them as a huge performer this season. Browning, maybe on a dynasty league, you can buy him, for his future. But both of them I'm more seeing as very serviceable players, but no one I'm desperate to go and seek and add. And we fell right into the same path we always do, Gary. We couldn't even argue on this one.
Yep. And Browning's just another one of those ones we're going to be talking about a couple more if we ever move on, if I ever shut up. So I'll let you do your thing, Kraig.
I just want to throw something out here. If you're in a deep dynasty league with taxi squads and things like that, someone you may want to consider keeping an eye on, Jonathan Cooper. He was a 7th-round pick and looks like he's going to be one of those edge guys that's given a chance. The coaching staff loved him in the offseason, and the coach even said before final cuts he's given enough effort and shown enough in the preseason that we're going to be keeping him, which is not something you see coaches doing before the final cuts very often. I think around like a 76% snap share this past week. So they're going to have edge guys probably getting chances next to Malik Reed. So someone to keep an eye on if you're looking for a deep pull. But that is not going to be really relevant this year, I don't think. Nor do I think, James, you're probably going to have a whole lot of a positive opinion on this one, but a blast from the past. Melvin Ingram traded to the Chiefs. They're trying to boost that pass rush. Got him for a 6th from the Steelers, who he had went to this year. This do anything for you?
If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I have a very large beef with Chiefs Twitter because I've been talking trash with them since the start of the season, saying I didn't think they were as good as everyone thought they were. And this is one of my many victory laps that I'll have throughout the season. That said, I think this is a great pickup for the Chiefs. Wow. Is Melvin Ingram an elite pass rusher anymore? Nope. Is he somebody that I'm going to go and immediately add in a fantasy league? Absolutely not. But for a 6th-round pick, I think he's a great flyer. If they move Chris Jones back inside, you got him, you got Frank Clark, you have potential to have a pass rush they haven't really had anyone else on that line, and Ingram seems to have that type of potential. I don't think he's absolutely dead. We've seen plenty of pass rushers come back after having some years of not existing anymore. That we just talked about Everson Griffin, for instance. So I think it's not the worst trade in the world. I think it's worth a 6th-round pick. If I was a Chiefs fan, I would say I like this, but I was a Chiefs fan, I'd say I need some more offensive weapons. So I'm about as optimistic as one could be about this trade, I think. I'm still pessimistic on the fact that, Ingram's going to be a player in a fantasy league, but I like it. I think it's good.
It's a real life good. Fantasy wise, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested until Ingram shows up, but when he shows up, if he does, I'll buy it as opposed to being skeptical on it.
Well, the reports and what they had been saying, I didn't get to watch any film on him, but they was actually saying that Ingram's actually done a decent job this year, just hasn't been able to finish out. That he's been able to get pressure on them, but he's just not getting the stats. They needed something done in KC. I mean, Frank Clark's not getting anything done. I think they said the first assumption was that maybe, Chris Jones might go back inside because Ingram's coming on. I think it's 2 different positions on there. Ingram should slot in probably in place of Frank Clark, put Frank Clark on the other side rushing or something. But I don't think it's going to affect Jones. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Ingram, well, I'd rather have Malik Reed, which we were just talking about Denver, and I got distracted. I mean, I've been a Malik Reed fan for a while, and he always hits his MSR, and he's been doing it from the strong side of the formation from Von Miller. So I think he's all of a sudden going to get 15 sacks this year? Hey, I'll tell you what, he led Denver last year, but that's stretching it. And he's messed around with the stronger side of the line for most of the offenses that he's playing because it is the blind side. So we'll see how he does. But as far as Ingram, I don't see any upside until, like James said, we see some stats, something on paper for him.
All righty. Moving on away from the trades, we're going to feeling of people taking over here. And it's one of the things that if you've been watching the show, you've been hearing both James and Gary talk about from the preseason into the regular season. It's finally happening. Gary, Taysom Hill, it sounds like, is taking over with Jameis Winston injured. I'm just messing with you. I gotta get a little offensive poke in there where I can. But no, Ernest Jones, it appears the Ernest Jones takeover has begun here. Troy Reeder had a 66% snap share, and Ernest Jones with a nice 92%. And talk about a big day starting. 7 solos, 2 assists, tackle for a loss, half a sack, pass deflection, and why not throw an interception in there as well. With the trade of Kenny Young that was mentioned to the Broncos, there had been some people wondering if this was a sign for just Jones or they liked both Jones long-term and Reeder now, but it seems pretty clear that they have faith in Jones. We talked about how you generally view rookies. I know that you had liked Ernest Jones. James, is this someone that if he's available out there, you're going to be jumping to go get?
Oh, absolutely. I don't like rookies. I talk about rookies constantly as being more or less overvalued throughout an entire season. They're not worth it. And if there's ever a time to go and get a rookie after he's shown up for 1 week, Ernest Jones is the time. He is on a defense that is going to produce a player when the player is good. Ernest Jones appears to be good, and that defense is going to feed him volume. It's going to feed him opportunity, and I think he's going to take and run with it. And I'm sure Gary is going to echo my jubilation here as we both were clamoring for it to become Ernest Jones time. You know, we said in probably all of our rookie leagues or leagues where we had rookie picks, Ernest Jones was our target because he was an excellent value. He wasn't going as high as we both felt he kind of should in an IDP world. And now it's been like 3/4 of a game for us, and I am thrilled about it. And I'm going to continue to say that Ernest Jones is someone you should buy. You should get him on your team, whether it's Dynasty, Redraft, wherever you are. I think you're seeing a future LB1 blossom, and when those things show up on the waiver wire, you need to go snatch them.
Yep. I was dancing around, man, watching the game. I was like, look, that dude is calling the plays on my Jeep. And his interception was kind of vanilla, but he was in the right place at the right time.
You got to be there.
The scheme, right. You know, it wasn't an athletic thing. The thing was pretty much thrown his way. So, but it still looked pretty. Hey, the kid's got the opportunity, and I think, you know, he graded out decently. He was not like some superstar in his first start, but this guy went from doing hardly no snaps at all through the season to wham, you're here. And I was excited for that. I didn't want anybody. Ernest Jones was not on my waiver wire last week because we just didn't know. I don't put out players that we don't know about. And when it really boiled down to it, I was thinking, you know, Troy Reader's got a good game or two here before, you know, Ernest Jones actually takes over. So to see this is like, you know, so exciting, folks. It's great when they work out like this. And I hope you all had an opportunity to hear us preach and clamor and backtrack when it was like at the beginning. It was not like necessarily backtracking, but like, what are we going to do with his shares? But here it is. He's broke out. And now with Troy Reader, hey, they say they're going to continue to use the second linebacker a little bit more than what they used to traditionally. With other second linebackers who was there getting about 30% of the snaps. We'll see. Keep Troy Reader on the radar. But, you know, right now we're looking at some very viable options out there that you might be able to replace Reader. Reader is not that good of a ball player. He never has been. He's always been productive by default when he's had the opportunity last year. So, but yes, victory lap.
Yeah, you know, I had such a victory lap. My cat came over, jumped on my victory lap, and knocked my headphones out. But we both agree. It's Ernest Jones time. Troy Reader, go away. You can be the reserve. You can be a mediocre, fine plug-in option if somehow our victory lap crashes and burns. But I feel so confident that it won't. Smile from ear to ear. I am thrilled about Ernest Jones.
And don't forget, folks, he is a rookie, so if he happens to stumble, don't freak out. Just keep in mind who is the best producing rookie linebacker right now? Bolton? Bolton's pretty much been the one to kick it in. So if we get anything out of Jones, and you all managed to get him off the waiver wire, you just picked him up late in the draft when we were telling you and banging on the table, it could pay dividends. It should pay dividends. Just don't get upset if he stumbles.
Progression is very rarely linear.
And we did have a question previously submitted. We don't have it up here to put on the screen, but we had someone asking if they would have us drop. It sounded like Devin Bush. Perhaps it was trade, but either way, the exchange was Devin Bush for Ernest Jones straight up. They had hesitation based on the fact that they had spent a high draft pick. It sounds like it was probably a dynasty league because he was talking about his rookie draft in Devin Bush previously. That was the hesitation. So, James, I know you had liked both of them coming into the year. So what are your thoughts on that one?
You know, I feel like I'm a perfect person to answer this question because coming into the year, Devin Bush was in my top 3 dynasty asset linebackers. So I'm someone who believes in Devin Bush, and I like him a lot. And now that we have, half a season gone by, do this trade. Don't wait around on Devin Bush anymore. Admit your mistakes. Admit when value is not happening. I don't want to be the person to say, Devin Bush isn't who I thought he was, and you can flip him for a guy who's now had one good week in his career. But this is the time when you can go and grab that type of value. You're going to get probably better current season value out of Ernest Jones, and you're going to probably get better long-term value out of Ernest Jones. It's not the answer that I wanted to say at the beginning of the season because I wanted Devin Bush to be a true stud, but you got to understand that a sunk cost is a sunk cost. Yeah, you spent that draft pick. You can't get that draft pick back. All you can do is get future production. And I think Ernest Jones is a better option.
As a guy who was already down on Bush, me and James had these getting defensives about that back in the offseason. I have no shares of them. You know, what I did was I went ahead and skipped over that ADP and was reaching for Jalen Smith, which just worked out so much better, right? So, but the nice thing about it was I had Ernest Jones already, so I don't have anything to worry about. Now, when this question first popped up, my first reaction is sitting there thinking, oh man, it's early, he's rookie. And then it really hit me. Dump to Bush. Bush is, you know, he's not worked out. You'll be able, you know, if you know anybody like us, we'll turn you on to some other linebackers next year in case Ernest Jones falters. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to ride out the rest of this season really comfortably and make everybody feel warm and fuzzy over drafting him next year. So
Gary's in favor of it. James is in favor of it. That's about all that you need. And we do have another one we'll do here quickly. Gary, go take a break or something.
Yeah.
James, will Pitts be better or worse off for the time, whatever that may be, that Kelvin Ridley is out here? How do you feel about that one?
You know, that's a really tough question. It's not even player oriented as opposed to, you know, who's going to be a better value or whatnot. I kind of want to think that Pitts is going to see a slight bump in value purely because there's nothing else there. But, you know, if Ridley's truly out long term and he's not back next year, I think Pitts' overall value will see a decrease because they're going to have to go out and find some sort of wide receiver weapon that, you know, can be somebody else there. You can't just double and triple team Pitts or do whatever defenses will do to just attack their one viable real receiving threat. So it's kind of a tough question because it's how short or long term do you think Ridley's going to be out? And the answer is no one has any idea. I like to think that Ridley will be back week 1 next year at the latest, but I'm guessing. I don't have any actual insight into this situation. So I think you just hold Pitts' value and you wait until you get more data.
Yeah, he still saw 6 targets. He didn't, you know, do very well. He had 2 catches on 13 yards on those 6. And it was really short notice, it appeared, for the Falcons, too, that Ridley wasn't going to be playing from how late the news broke. So it still felt like he was getting targets, and, you know, that's really all you can be asking for with a guy like that. So I agree. I think this year Pitts will be fine. So if that's how far you're looking out, hopefully that answers your question for you. But we're going to move on to a different kind of mess here. The Eagles linebacking core. Eric Wilson was a healthy scratch last week, and Alex Singleton, who had for most of the season been the main linebacker in terms of snap share, he had 34%, with TJ Edwards at 66% and Davion Taylor at 63% in that blowout win over the Detroit Lions. Interestingly, the head coach said with Eric and the way it went down, Davion was going to play a little bit more, and so was TJ. And there was a role for Alex in some of the third down areas. So what it really came down to is we don't have a luxury anymore to dress that many linebackers. James, I know we had sort of flagged this one as a mess going into the season, and it feels like it's going to be turning into possibly even more of a mess here. But do you think it's going to be what we had seen previously more so in terms of that split because of the weird week that was this past week with the blowout win that they gave some of these younger guys more opportunity, or do you think it's just going to be that large of a mess going forward?
I mean, it's definitely going to be a mess. Is it going to be a predictable mess? Pretty unlikely. But, you know, coming into this season, I was not high on Alex Singleton, but he was the guy who I was the highest out of after Eric Wilson, who's my favorite just a guy. Well, Eric Wilson has officially fallen into just a guy not even playing guy. So he's pretty out of the question. He's not the type of talent who's going to just win back a coaching staff. He seems to have met his time and seen it end here in Philadelphia, apparently. You know, he's going to probably be a non-active until they decide to activate him, but I don't think he's going to come back to any sort of fantasy relevance. And, you know, starting the season, Alex Singleton was the guy to own. He got that volume. He appeared to be good, and I was very like, well, I don't think Alex Singleton's very good, but he's producing, so ride that hand. and now he's not producing. And as of last week, it looked like TJ's the guy who's going to produce. He's certainly got a solid amount of volume. It was a blowout win. It was weird. They're not going to blow out every team going forward, but when you're predicting Messi and no one really stands out as a talent, by and large, my strategy is to go with the people who are producing. And sure, he might not produce next week, and I'm wrong, but he produced last week, and there's no reason to think anyone else is definitely going to produce. So give me whoever's doing well, and also don't give me anyone because I don't want anyone, and I want a better situation. But if I have to pick, that's where I'm leaning. I'm it's throwing whatever you can at the wall and hoping something sticks. There's not a lot of analysis here when they're just playing guys and seeing what happens.
I'm trying to remember who Philadelphia is playing next week. This coming week.
I think it's the Chargers.
Right.
It is the Chargers.
Yeah, TJ Edwards didn't make the waiver wire for me, even after playing all those snaps and producing like he did, for the fact of what the hell is going to happen next week. It could be Taylor all of a sudden doing this. So I wouldn't, in a really deep format, I mean, if you have the room, if you missed out on some of these better, bye-week options, waiver wire options or something like that. I mean, if you couldn't get Ernest Jones and you're really just needing to stretch it, I suppose Edwards could be on your radar. I could have swore that the other fault was, too, that I didn't like the matchup, so I'm just double checking that. For you, those of you that might be running back to, if you got Edwards up above some of these other guys on the waiver wire, go take them off. Just don't trust it. It's not worth it. We've seen them just do all kinds of crazy stuff over the years with these linebackers. By the way, I've mentioned it before. It probably has not changed. I'm 99% sure it's changed. Did you know that the Philadelphia Eagles for the last few years has always just been like spending 5% of what the best paid linebackers in the whole? There's teams out there with one linebacker making more than what their whole linebacker core together is making. He probably pays more taxes. They're dead last in paying their linebackers. I don't get it.
That.
Yeah. Look it up. I know there was dead last year. I can't see it improving because they didn't have anything. Okay, we're looking at the Chargers,
and I think
it could be I'll tell you what, if we knew Alex Singleton was going to play 80-90% of the snaps next week, I'd tell you to play him. But as it is, because the matchup's actually decent enough that somebody should produce, but you just can't trust this right now. Wait it out. I think you got to go with your other options first.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in there that let's say someone picks whoever it is, and that person is right. Well, what was your process in getting there? If your process was I just picked someone and it was right, that's not a good process, and you got lucky as opposed to actually figuring something out. There's a reason Gary and I are kind of tossing our hands up, going, I don't know. Even though with all of our other players, we think we know. The reason is this is clearly and definitively not a situation that's very predictable. They don't know what they're doing. They're just throwing people out there. If any of these linebackers got cut and needed to go get added by a different team, no one would make any of these guys a priority in real life football because none of them are that good. And you have to remember, come this time, 365 days from now, we're not going to be talking about any of these guys as surefire, solid starters. They're all going to be in the same position again.
All right, and we're going to move into, quickly before we end the show, one or two potential waiver wire guys that you might feel good about adding here. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. Please hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. And you go hit that notification bell that anytime you see us popping up, whether it's our first or second attempt at a show, if something happens, you'll be aware and you'll be able to go watch us. And while you're subscribing, go to gridironratings.com. You get a subscription there, and you can see all of Gary and James' ratings, articles, Gary's rolling waiver wire, all that good stuff that you need to get that edge up in your IDP league. And of course, at the website, you can find even more than IDP. You can find everything. So please go subscribe there as well. Gary, I know you got a name or two. So who you throwing at us for this week?
All right, so folks, I'm going to go a little deeper. I'm actually going to start off with Bengals linebacker Pratt. No, folks, this is kind of deep here. Like, I'm not lying, but I mean, we got 4 teams on bye. I don't know what kind of format you got. Hey, tell you what, Browns they give up a lot of points to the inside linebacker position, and normally when Pratt is playing a run team, then Pratt gets more of his 60 to 75% of the snaps. And he usually produces. So we know Logan Wilson's going to feed pretty well. Well, I wouldn't expect anything more than, I'm going to throw a cap on it about 7. I think he could hit 8 combined tackles this week in this matchup with 70% of the snaps. Then, I've already mentioned Xavier Woods. Let's see, I think Everson Griffin could be a viable play if he's on your waiver wire for a bye week, just because of the matchup. I'll give one more. Can't forget about Josh Bynes, folks. Don't forget, he put Queen into a part-time role. And I'll go vanilla. Grady Jarrett's got another strong one, folks, if you need a defensive tackle play.
James, who you got?
Yeah, I'll give my 3, big hitters for this week. I like Jonathan Greenert against Miami. He's kind of a name that no one really talks about because he plays for Houston, and Houston's trash, and he's going up against a team like Miami, and Miami's trash. But quietly, every single game, he's recorded a defensive statistic. He's also recorded a sack. His past 3 games, he has 5 sacks. He's also got a pretty nice, solid tackle average in those games, averaging over 4 tackles per game combined. And he's going up against the Miami offensive line that, in the Halloween spirit, is a bunch of ghosts because they're barely there. So I really like what's going on here. He's a very, very nice stream. He might even be better than that. He might be, someone who we just all kind of haven't noticed because there's not a lot to notice over in Houston, but I'm kind of liking this. I think that there could be sneaky long-term value in addition to some great short-term value. Over at linebacker, give me Tay Crowder versus the Raiders. He's only got 6.5 tackles on average his past 2 games, which is fine and solid enough, but the Raiders just lost Henry Ruggs, in theory, for a little bit of time. They're not going to have a downfield weapon. Derek Carr already has that reputation as being a check down guy. So I think they're going to keep it short. I think Tay Crowder is going to get plenty of tackle opportunities. And I think, again, if you're looking for a nice little stream, he's a stream that I'm going to go and take. And last, but probably least, actually, not least, he is least, I'm going to go with Julian Blackman, a guy who no one really likes and constantly has opportunity and never really jumps up and seizes the day. But he's going up against the Jets, who I don't know how and I don't know why, but they just let the Cincinnati secondary just eat volume last week. You had Jesse Bates and Von Bell. They combined for 17 tackles. You had Chidobe Awuzie get, I think, another 7 tackles on top of that in that secondary. And now Julian Blackman's going up against these Jets. And he's going to be playing. He gets those snaps. So if you're looking to find some sort of opportunity as a bye week plugin, give me Julian Blackman. I like this opportunity here. I know some leagues he might be on because people love him, but I don't. And in my leagues, he is available. So I plug and play.
I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news.
We're not getting defensive, but go ahead, Kraig.
He tore his Achilles and he's out for the year as of like 2 weeks ago. So
yeah,
you might not want to play him.
That's why he's on the waiver wire, my friend.
That is why I saw him out there, and that is why his most recent snap count is so high, because he snapped and hasn't played these past 2 weeks. So my mistake on him, but regardless, the overall sentiment does play. Attack that secondary for a bye week play. So I don't even know who subbed in clearly because
I'm going to bail you out, man. Okay, he's not lying, folks, but go get Sendejo. Sendejo
Perfect.
will fill in that spot for you nicely. He didn't got a lot of flash, but he will get those base combined tackles. Very good.
In case you folks don't notice, when you're looking at bye week plays, you're looking at matchups. You're not looking at names.
Right.
I'm playing the matchup here. I don't even know Julian Blackman's hurt.
No.
But that's what you got to do.
They don't put the little IR next to the name.
Yeah, sometimes research gets the best of you. But again, you got to just attack matchups, and I think that's a great matchup to go and attack.
It's going to be an even better one because it sounds like they're without both their starting safeties because Kari Willis also got hurt. So they're down to 2 backups in that secondary. So you have to imagine they're going to be going attacking them. Yeah.
I wouldn't go after Odeman, folks. Odeman, something like that. I mean,
he's Odeman,
he's not quite there. If you're going after somebody, go for Sendejo. But we got another question here.
Yep, I'll get to that. I just want to throw out a name there for deep leagues because that's mainly what I play in. But this guy's probably available in those. He's a defensive tackle for the Saints. It's David, and I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's like Anamata or something like that. But he had been suspended the first 6 games of the year. He had like a 44% snap share and didn't do a whole lot. But going against the Falcons is a good matchup. Most people have probably forgot about him, and he was great last year. If you're in the defensive tackle or interior lineman league, he was around like a top 20 guy. So someone that people have probably forgotten about with a good matchup coming up that played well, go look at him would be my advice. But yes, Gary, I know you want to get to this offensive question quick. So,
please, yeah. Can't wait.
Would you trade Michael Pittman for Fournette? He's CMC, Gibson, CEH. Melvin Gordon, it's a 12-man PPR. He's 5-3. CD, Higgins, Pittman, Tony, and Emmanuel Sanders. No info. And if you're still there, LeBron's, if you can let us know quickly if it's Dynasty or redraft, I think that would matter because Dynasty, there's no way I'm trading Pittman for Fournette. If you need help, and it kind of seems like you might at linebacker, I'd at least consider it here in a redraft league. How you feeling there, James?
I think I would consider it. I'd kind of lean no. Pittman was a guy who I was very low on heading into the season, and I missed out. And I think we did just get that info that this is a redraft, so that makes it easier to move Pittman. But at the same time, he says he's 5-3. He's got CMC. He's got CEH, 2 running backs who are supposed to be good and supposed to be coming back. So I think that at 5-3, you don't need to make this kind of deal. Because if and when those guys come back, mixed in with Gibson, Gordon, and maybe something else you find along the waiver wire, Fournette's really kind of an afterthought, whereas I think Pittman is a very clear starter with Higgins and CD. So I'm going to lean no. I'm going to say you can just hold steady and find what you can find on the waiver wire or wherever else and roll with Gibson, roll with Gordon, roll with some matchup, and I'd hold, maybe try and flip Tony and Sanders for running back who's not at Fournette's level, but at least a little bit shorter and a little bit nicer. But I'm not making that move. I'm holding.
What happened to Gage?
Russell Gage?
Yeah.
He's playing. He's back from injury.
Oh, is he? I couldn't tell with him on my roster getting me a 0 in the box score.
I was going to say he's enjoying the Halloween spirit. He's a ghost.
Yeah.
Well, that does us for us tonight, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and submitting your questions. And hopefully we gave you some Week 9 winning advice here. You can find us all at our Twitter handles below. Gary and James, of course, you can find their production over at gridironratings.com. Please let us know throughout the week if you have any more questions. And then we'll be back Thursday night. It'll be Gary, Dynasty Trip, and I think Johnny's coming on. Is that what it sounded like, Gary?
Yeah, we got Johnny the Greek. Kraig, I don't know if you're going to co-host.
I don't know yet at the moment.
Okay. Because JJ's not going to be able to make it this week. He's crash coursing. He's in school getting his master's. I don't know. He's on special assignment. But either way. So, yeah, it'll be me, Trip, and possibly you and Johnny the Greek from the IDP guys.
Yep, and that'll be at 9 o'clock Eastern, same bat channel here. Make sure you tune in for that. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and the 3 of us will see you next week, Tuesday. Have a great night.